Hello, and welcome to the Who Do You Think We Are podcast. This is a sociology podcast where we are going to be talking about various topics that are affiliated with sociology. I am your host, Devyn Wickson. I am a student at Rogers State University. Today, we are going to be discussing social evolution and the unique effect social evolution had upon various tribal nations in the United States of America from the first contact to present day. So first, I would like to talk about what is social evolution. So, social evolution is a process of directional social change. Um, but there are various ideas of social evolution depending on the theorist. So, for instance, Saint Simon, Comte, Marx, and Condorcet before them all believed in the laws of evolution coincided with the laws of progress, meaning that social evolution was a concept of progression. And so when a society was developing and going through changes, um, it was typically in a way that was to make them better. Um, Now, my claim is that social evolution is bidirectional or multidirectional in the sense that it is not consistently changing in a way of progression. And sometimes, depending on the social evolution, it can be regressive um, or relapsing. Especially whenever we're discussing Native American history, um, there were so many different tribes in from the tip of Canada to the bottom of South America. Um, and they all were very unique in their governments and their societies, in the way that they got food or whether they stayed in one location, if they moved frequently, the way that their families were set up in all different types of ways. Um, and I think that there's this large misconception that when Native Americans were found, that they didn't have a sophisticated way of life. And that's not only Native Americans, but all of the indigenous populations from North and South America. So, according to National Geographic, first contact potentially occurred in 980 AD in Greenland by Vikings. And the contact was between Vikings and the Inuits as well as Yupik people of the modern North American Arctic. And during that contact, it ended in the favor of the indigenous people. They were able to resist any occupation by the settlers at that time. Um, However, in 1492, Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean with Spanish ships and began colonizing immediately at the hands of the Taino, the Arawak, and the Lucayan people. Um, and then from there, well, first of all, um, Columbus's actions in the Caribbean were very disturbing, so much so that it's um, hard to speak about, especially on a podcast format. But it was very violent and controlling and unfair and unjust. Uh, and then from there, the Spanish moved throughout Central America and South America and in modern Mexico, but there were already societies there. And so, when we look at the Mayan society, they were very much an agrarian society, which we think of as a advanced society. They had a class structure, they had architects, there was art as well, and there was a form of economy. They had great um, structures within that society, and it was a large society, but it was a very small piece of the world. And so um, that goes to say that there was already foundation on these lands prior to first contact. There was no need for any improvements from European contact to be made. And if anything, um, European contact was it resulted in destruction of these societies and set them back. And so social evolution in that sense for the Maya people was very destructive. Um, and it wasn't it these lands weren't taken over in a fair way. Typically the Spanish would attack these empires during times of weakness, whenever they had their own civil wars and conflicts going on, as well as whenever diseases were striking throughout those lands. So I want to look at two Native American societies. I choose two because there are so many. There's 575 federally recognized tribes in the United States alone, and prior to first contact, there were more than that. But the first tribe I want to look at is the Cherokee Nation, which is considerably a larger tribe. They're originally from the eastern part of the United States. And we'll also look at the Kiowa tribe, um, who is a much smaller tribe. They traveled much more frequently. And these two tribes had very different societies. The Cherokee Nation was a matrilineal society separated into seven clans, being the Wolf Clan, Blue, Long Hair, Wild Potato, Deer, Bird, and Paint. Um, this information is coming directly from CherokeePhoenix.com, which is a news outlet of the Cherokee Nation. And I quote, "The Blue Clan subdivisions are Panther or Wildcat and Bear, which is considered the oldest clan. This clan produced people who were able to make special medicines for children." So these seven clans were matrilineal, which meant that the woman would run the households, and you would get your clan from your mother as well. Now, it was very important to know which clan that you were in because marriage within clans was forbidden. Um, you were considered family within those clans. But I want to talk about the separation of clans because it shows a structure of sophistication, as well as kind of a socialistic separation of economy and social class as well. All of these clans had purposes and they were very important to one another. The second clan that I want to look at is the Deer Clan. So it says members of the Deer Clan were known as fast runners and hunters. Even though they hunted game for subsistence, they respected and cared for the animals while they were living among them. They were also known as messengers on an earthly level, delivering messages from village to village or person to person. And like I said, this just shows that there was purpose within this. It wasn't just something to do. It wasn't just cool. It was intentional. And so now there are still clans, but obviously the Cherokee Nation structure is much more, I would say, Americanized. The economy is very much congruent with American economy, and the society is very much modernly associated with American society. However, the Cherokee Nation is one of few tribes that has its own schools, um, has its own government positions, as well as a high level of economy. Now, the Kiowa tribe is traditionally a warrior society that is separated into bands. Originally, there were seven bands, but of them, one of them was eliminated by a rival tribe. These bands lived separately in various positions east of the Rocky Mountains in the plains. Although separated for a majority of the time, they were governed as a whole, speaking the same language and practicing the same religion, being the Sundance religion and later peyote religion before eventually implementing Christianity. These six bands are Big Shield, Kiowa Proper, Black Boy, Ree, Kiowa Apache, who, side note, did speak a separate language but were able to communicate with the other Kiowas, as well as the Elk. Kiowas also had a class system. Now, the class system was typically separated by your, it was more by prestige of your abilities or the things that you have done. And so, for instance, Koi Sanko was the Kiowa 10, which were your 10 strongest warriors. And in order to be within that organization, you had to do a specific amount. You had to do at least, I believe it was 40 um, war coops. And then you had to go through a ceremonial fight to get into Koitseko. Um, but 40 war coops is a lot. And so the class system was separated by prestigiousness, whether you were a great hunter or if you were good with beadwork or if you were just talented in general or bringing something to the table, essentially. You were able to provide. That would make you a prestigious tribal member. And then in the middle, which was a majority of the tribe, um, were still very prominent tribal members or family members, but maybe they were younger and just hadn't acquired those tasks yet, or checked those boxes quite yet. And then on the bottom, you had captives. So because Kiowas were a warrior society, they did have many captives, and captives were eligible to become a part of the tribe for various reasons, whether that meant that um, they completed some type of uh, war coup, or if they were great hunters, or sometimes during war times, the tribe would lose a considerable amount of warriors, and those captives had to become a part of the tribe in order to uh, have a sustainable tribe. But Kiowas had their own form of economy. They were able to domesticate animals as well, and they were a tribe that migrated. I don't like to use the word nomadic because nomads are considered wanderers. Kiowas were not wandering, they were moving with a purpose. And they typically followed herds of bison. However, not all Kiowas ate bison. For instance, the elk band preferred to eat elk, and that's why they're named the elk band, because that's what they liked. Um, but Kiowas were considered, you could consider them a hunter-gatherer society. However, they did travel very far. They were great travelers. They traveled as far north as to see the white bear or a polar bear, and as far south to see the man in the trees or monkeys. And so along the way, there was a lot of bartering going on as well as trade. And so they were sophisticated people. And also, they were appreciative of their way of life. They are one of the last resisting tribes. In 1867 is whenever they signed the Medicine Lodge Treaty and were supposed to be moved to the reservation. However, they did not abide by their agreement and continued to conflict with settlers, which would eventually create more issues between them and the American federal government, who would step in and stop their way of life completely and basically alter the direction of their free ways and um, confined them to the reservation by capturing many of their warriors who would be imprisoned, and their freedom was compromised in that way. At the time that they were captured, they were considered a very wealthy tribe as they had acquired many horses. Kiowas would steal horses from the Spanish conquistadors, and they would use them in warfare as well as hunting. And so, um, a part of the Kiowa social evolution was the horse and discovering the horse and being able to not only utilize that horse, but to master it. They were great horsemen. And so that would be a progressive form of social evolution for the Kiowa tribe. Now, where the demise comes in with Native Americans in social evolution is during this time of removal and confiding them to a reservation because now natives are not only in a place that is somewhat foreign to them, but they are not no longer allowed to hunt. They are no longer allowed to participate in their religious beliefs, which essentially shakes their entire world. And now they are sending they're forced to send their children to boarding schools. For the Kiowas, it was Carlisle Indian School in southwestern Oklahoma, as well as Riverside Indian School. My grandmother specifically went to Chilocco Indian School, and basically within these boarding schools is where a lot of the damage was done. They were not allowed to speak their language. They were forced to cut their hair. They were forced to wear different clothing and follow a religion that they were not accustomed to. And because of this abuse, there was a lot of shame that came with it. And so, upon returning home, many of these tribal members did not uh, revert back to their traditional tribal ways, including speaking their own language, which was detrimental to the sustainability of that tribe in their own ways. Maybe the tribe still exists. However, what is the what is the nucleus? What's the core of that tribe at that time? And it's at that time it was slowly deteriorating. Um, but food rations were also a detrimental part to the physical health of the tribal members, as uh, this food that was given to them, for one, was not enough, and secondly, was not did not attain enough sustenance, and so there was health concerns that occurred, including obesity, diabetes, all there was various health concerns that came with that time in life. The many of the lands that native tribes were confided to did not attain the resources that were needed in order to be prosperous. Um, and it is my own personal belief that after these tribes were put onto reservations, it was a goal of the government to disable them through various tactics in order to slow down their progression or hinder their progression completely in order to prevent an uprising later on whenever the tribes were able to rebuild their population as well as their ways of life and um, their their warriors because they were so prone to fighting and to resisting in order to protect their way of life. Now, this project is titled The Seventh Generation because during these times of difficult change, a strong factor in deciding on whether they would continue to fight or if they would try to protect their longevity was thinking of the seventh generation. I am of the sixth generation, and so my children are the seventh generation. And so it is very meaningful to revisit these things and to learn about these things and try to reverse a lot of the wrongdoing of that time. Moving on into um, kind of how we developed into modern times, we have tribal governments now. So in the 20s and 30s, tribes were forced to create their own governments in order to basically prove that they were a people. And along with that came blood quantum. So blood quantum is a way to prove that you are native or that you belong to a tribe based upon the original individuals that signed into agreements with the government. And so essentially, if a tribe establishes a blood quantum, let's say that it's a quarter, that means that as long as you can track that you are 25% Kiowa, then you can be a part of the tribe. But anything below that, you are no longer a part of the tribe. This is very much a system in which tribes would bleed out because eventually you just run out of people to marry. Eventually, if everybody was marrying within their tribe, then eventually you are inevitably going to be marrying your own family member. And so with modern times, obviously people are integrating and marrying outside of their tribe. And even if, I marry somebody that's Cherokee and we have children, my children are still going to be half of whatever blood that I give them, no matter if they're native or not. And so it's a way that tribes will eventually bleed themselves out and they will be eliminated. Health services are also a part of our uh, modern uh, tribal, I guess, resources that we have today. Um, but they are considerably not as good as if you were to say have health insurance and able to go to a regular hospital. There's various, I would say, not even conspiracies, but theories as to why this is. But if you just think about it with even the blankest mind, the American federal government is probably not going to provide the best health care for free. Um, and so, really, what I want to uh, convey to my audience is that social evolution is very bidirectional. It is not always in a progressive manner. Sometimes we're undergoing change socially that is detrimental to us, but we are doing it in a way to survive. And this is very much a prime example of that, is what Native Americans are going through. Even though we are a part of this modern world, it is not necessarily our world any longer. And our tribal ways have very much been compromised from where they were before. And any progress that was being made during those times was put to a halt and made to adjust into a way that is American. So that'll conclude my video. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this video to some way, shape, or form, and that you have learned something as well. Thank you very much, and have a good day.